Chainsaw Man chapter 138 proves to us that if we're ever in a situation where our gut is telling us that something's up with a girl that Denji's talking to, or just any character in general, it's best to just trust our guts and not overthink it, because Fujimoto left us with the last chapter thinking that this might be some crazy female character who is secretly a devil, when the obvious answer ended up being the most correct answer, which is this girl, she's just batty crazy, and she also happens to be a devil hunter. So if any of you guys in the comment section said that she was a devil hunter who just happened to be crazy, or someone who's working for Yoshida or anything close to that, congratulations, because you are a great prognosticator, which means our boy Denji is truly about to suffer, because my guy got dragged again in this chapter in a way that makes me wonder if he's ever truly going to know what it's like to bag a woman who likes him for him, or is he going to be destined to only rely on clout when it comes to being Chainsaw Man? While it's definitely a gift, it's also a curse. So with my initial thoughts out of the way, let's back things up a bit and let's dive into the recap portion of the review before we further unpack the chapter. So the chapter opens up with Denji and that crazy girl staring at each other, and we see her charging forward at Denji with a bat, but instead of busting Denji over the head, we see that she's actually trying to save Denji from being attacked by the guy who's holding a gun and pointing it at Denji, which we later find out is actually a toy gun. And this leads to Denji asking the real questions. Are you my enemy or not? And if you're not my enemy, why were you singing when those guys, you know, they're trying to attack me, they're trying to kill me? What's up with that? And that leads to Yoshida popping up out of nowhere and introducing her and saying that she's been assigned to watch over Denji, and it's in this moment that I believe we can safely say that Yoshida might be another Makima, because just as Makima was putting people around Denji for the purposes of control and the threat of execution hanging over Denji's head, Yoshida's doing something similar. Makima wanted to give Denji the relationships that he craves so that he could be broken and utterly controlled. Yoshida is doing something similar by giving Denji someone who would do every nasty thing that he's willing to think about if Denji's even willing to use just a drop of his clout that comes to being Chainsaw Man to get sex. But she's also someone who clearly has a role of keeping Yoshida in the loop if Denji uses his powers so that Nayuta can be executed. Fujimoto, with just one panel, I believe just cemented quite a bit when it comes to Yoshida's character. We also learn that Fumiko is 22 years old and pretending to be a high school student, and we learn that she is indeed crazy because the only reason she wasn't jumping in when Denji was being attacked is because Fumiko says that she does not want her song to be interrupted, which, yikes, that's just absolutely crazy. Imagine Denji's out here slapboxing with a devil and she's sitting there singing karaoke and going, nope, can't step in because it's the chorus of the song. This is getting really good. Gotta hit those high notes first. Denji and those crazy females, it's something that I think we can safely say go hand in hand together, synonymous. It's like peanut butter and jelly. They're just two things you automatically think of each other as. We then learn from Yoshida that Denji can expect to continue to be attacked by people who know his identity, but those people who were attacking him are doing so without leaving any ways to actually identify them, which leads me to believe that this might have been something that was going on in the background that Denji just wasn't aware of, and this will explain why Yoshida is at the same school as Denji. We see that Fumiko is saying that she's impressed with Denji being able to fight so well and use so much power despite not transforming, and it's something that I think was needed for readers as a reminder. Denji, before the events of Chainsaw Man Part 1, he was a devil hunter, and Denji in Part 1 of Chainsaw Man had some fights where he was the one fighting on his own. No transformation, and was doing pretty well against some pretty strong devils. So it was nice to see a bit of a refresher for how strong Denji is compared to normal humans, and have another character remark that he's actually pretty strong, because I think sometimes it can be easy to say that Denji's fodder without Pochita, same way a lot of Naruto fans tend to say that Naruto's weak without Kurama, thinking that just as Denji's only strong with Pochita, they think Naruto's only strong with Kurama, when in reality both of those characters are pretty cracked on their own. Now this leads to Fumiko giving Denji some hope by telling him, hey senpai, I'm always gonna like you, and she says that she's attracted to him, only to then go in the next sentence that I'm attracted to you because you're Chainsaw Man, which leads to Yoshida stepping in to give her the horny bonk over the head and sentence her to horny jail. The story then shifts over to Mitaka laying in the bed, and we see her watching the news report on her screen, and Yoru's going, yep, this is pretty cool. Kind of crazy to think that Chainsman got to experience something like this as well. And we see that Mitaka isn't the one who's taken too kindly to being famous and getting the clout from being famous. She actually values her privacy, showing another sign of a potential split coming between Yoru and Mitaka. And we see even more of that, just given we see Mitaka say that she's doing this to save Chainsaw Man, and Yoru saying she's doing this to kill Chainsaw Man, because in their minds they think that they're going after a different Chainsaw Man without realizing Pochita and Denji are a duo, just like the two of them are. You can't have Yoru without Mitaka. You can't have Denji without Pochita. Meanwhile, we see Denji looking at a poster of Mitaka, and we learn something interesting, which is when Yoru takes over, those scars on Mitaka's face are seen by others, which makes you go back to that moment when Yoshida was looking at Mitaka when Yoru tried to seduce him a little bit differently, because that might imply that he saw the scars, and even then, if that wasn't the case, that lines up what Makima told us in part 1. A close look reveals who's a devil, who's a human, and who's a fiend. The guy Denji's speaking to expects him to remember him, and he introduces himself as Swordman, which longtime readers of Chainsaw Part 1, you should automatically go, wait a minute, like that meme. And this leads to Denji being asked to follow him so they can actually speak in private. And I do want to say this, when it comes to Denji and Pochita being a package deal, the same way that Yoru and Mitaka are a package deal, obviously there are differences between Denji and the circumstances and situation with Pochita and the ones with Yoru, but I think you guys kind of get where I'm going with when I say it's a package deal, just given the fact that both of their personalities are kind of tied together. Denji is Chainsaw Man, and Mitaka at the end of the day is acting alongside Yoru, the War Devil. Now, let's back things up a little bit now that the recap is done, because we have some major world building implications that we have to actually go over. So the sword hybrid is alive, which means that other hybrids we saw in Chainsaw Man Part 1, in particular the ones that Makima was controlling, they might pop back up. If this is indeed the case, I'm good with it. The lore for Chainsaw Man is expanding, and Fujimoto is a good enough of a writer to explain it to us without us feeling like we've been cheated. The other thing is that given the way that Fumiko is acting, she's just as silly and carefree as Himeno, which if that is the case, I'm definitely mentally preparing myself not to get attached to her, because I'm still not over Himeno's death. That's the one death from Chainsaw Man Part 1 that still rocks me to this day when I revisit that scene. It's not like the scene with Power where she opens up the door and Makima goes bang and Power goes splat splat, and then I just start clutching my sides laughing. When it comes to Himeno's death, that one actually, especially in the anime, almost brought me to tears. That one touched me. Now, I also like the way that Fujimoto took time out of this chapter to briefly update us on Mitaka, and by showing her being unable to handle the pressures and the price of fame, it humanizes her character and it makes her more likable, which is easily one of the more underrated aspects of Chainsaw Man Part 2, which is the continued development of Asa Mitaka, which can be overshadowed at times by the fact that when Denji's on the screen, the plot just picks up, things get crazier, things get more exciting, but that's exactly why I think the duo of these two characters works so well. Denji gives us all the highs that we love from Chainsaw Man Part 1. It's something that really fits his personality, whereas Mitaka grounds us after we get those highs to go a more traditional character-driven storytelling, and it's something that really fits more of Mitaka's more serious personality, at least serious in the sense of when you compare it to Denji. And when these two are together in the same chapter, things just work. I stand by it. I really think Fujimoto has found money when he has these two characters in the same chapter together. These two characters have the level of chemistry that The Miz and LA Knight had together when they were on screen on Monday Night Raw last night. Now, what's also interesting about this chapter is that the sword hybrid is telling us, hey Denji, you should remember me. It is kind of Fujimoto saying, you sussy bakas, you better be paying attention, because not only did we see this character in the Control Devil arc, but when Denji was getting slapped up by the Falling Devil, there was someone giving Denji blood, and when you look back at it, that looks like that was the sword hybrid, which would explain why he expected Denji to remember him. However, we have bigger questions we have to ask. How did all these people know that Denji was Chainsaw Man? Like, you would think that would be be some confidential information? That's a $1,000,000 question. And given Fujimoto is bringing back people like Swordman, a guy who is basically a jobber on the Chainsaw Man roster, it's pretty clear that Fujimoto isn't going to let this go unaddressed. We just got to sit back and let this man cook. However, that's going to be it for this Chainsaw Man review. Make sure to stay tuned, 'cause I got more Chainsaw Man videos coming in the future.